All right, joining us today on Pirate Radio Live from Pack Pride, Cory Smith, once again joining us on the program. Cory, good to check in with you during the hot summer as fall camp begins. How you doing?
Yes, sir. Doing well. Hope you guys are.
Yeah, man, doing good around these parts, getting ready for the opener, Pirates and the Pack. And Cory, let's look back. Just had ACC and American Media Days last week, and the biggest comment coming out of that, at least for us, and I guess for NC State as well, of course, is Dave Doran saying he wants to beat the bleep out of East Carolina. I didn't have much reaction to that comment. We want to beat the bleep out of State. I think it's awesome for us in the media. It's great. You want something rather than the regular coach speak. You want games to matter. You want both teams to care, and we kind of got all of that. How about from the state side of it? What was the fans' reaction when they heard the comments from Dave Doran?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's healthy. You got two in-state teams playing each other, whether you want to call it a rivalry or not, whatever you want to do. It's two in-state programs that it means something to both of them. I mean, for NC State, you have to get the season off to the right start. For ECU, you have a chance to win two straight in this series, and obviously it's a big series, like I said, for both teams. I think some of it was taken a little bit out of context because he was talking about the fact that he was frustrated with the way that both games ended last season. He was talking about UNC and the ECU game at the end of last season, and they both ended with fights. One because of NC State, players going out and trying to plant a flag in the middle of the field. The other one happening because of the fact that there was some frustration with Tamarcus Cooley, and he's no longer even on the team anymore. So, like, those types of things, are now gone and in the rearview mirror. But, when you're asked about those and you bring it up and you say, I want to beat the bleep out of ECU, that's going to make headlines. And it's going to be something that, I'm sure, Blake Harrell's using as some, bulletin board material as well.
No doubt. Will any of that carry over to the opener on NC State sides, Cory? Will they be missing anybody suspended for a game due to that?
Yeah, we haven't been told anything along those lines, anybody suspended after that one or anything like that. I mean, that's definitely something we need to ask, going into fall camp. And I don't even know if it's been decided yet.
Right.
Like I said, I wouldn't even say the main culprit of it because he was involved at the beginning of it. But Tamarcus Cooley, like I said, is now on LSU's roster. So unless NC State's planning on, telling him that he has to sit out for the first half of that game, I don't think that's going to work. But yeah, there was several guys involved in that are no longer even with the team in the first place, whether it was due to attrition or, due to the fact that they're just out on another roster now at this point.
I think our towel snatcher, Yannick Smith, got out of there unscathed, so that's good. It's never the first guy, it's always the second, third, and eighth. But, hey, man, it should make for a fun one coming up in Raleigh at the end of August. Cory, looking at this NC State team, I was thinking about this, having you on. I got a lot of state buddies, went to some games in the 2000s, and thinking about that, you had the Phillip Rivers era where it was offense, and if you could get a few stops, you could win games. And then I remember after that, you had the Mario Williams, Manny Lawson, I think maybe Tulloch was the linebacker then. McCargo, I remember his name. He had a cool name, but it was like you could stop anybody and couldn't get good quarterback play. So how about this year's team? Is there one side kind of way ahead of the other? Is it a balanced team? How do you feel heading into 2025?
Yeah, I would definitely say the offense is the one that has more firepower this time around. Bringing CJ Bailey back, the expectations for him are through the roof for NC State, obviously. There's a little extra motivation for him being ranked. I believe USA Today had him like 15th out of 17 quarterbacks in the ACC going into the year. So there's a little added motivation like, hey, the fan base thinks I'm here, but nationally they still think I'm this low. So anything to add fuel to the fire. But you add in a guy like Hollywood Smothers that I'm still confused as to why he didn't take a single snap in the third quarter of that game against ECU, but that's a story for another day. But he's as explosive as you can possibly get out of the backfield for NC State. They just need to keep him healthy throughout the year. Duke's got a young player behind him that they feel really highly about. And then Justin Jolie that had a big impact in that game against ECU and had a big impact down the stretch last season with CJ Bailey. Noah Rogers, a former top 50 overall wide receiver in his class, and then Wesley Grimes that ran a 4.2 440 during their testing at the end of the season. And then they bring in several offensive linemen to add to that left side that they feel really good about. But the question mark now is going to be on the defensive side of the football. This was not not even close to a top 25 defense, which is what Tony Gibson had the 3 years prior. Last year, they lose him because he goes to Marshall, and then they bring in DJ Elliott, a guy who had been out of college football for 2 years. The last time that he coached on the defensive side of the football was when he was at Temple for one season, was with the Eagles the following year, and then sat out all of last season. So there's not a whole lot of known commodities there. They bring back several players, in the front six or front seven, however they're planning on lining up. They haven't even told us the defensive alignment yet, but they bring back several guys there. The big question mark is going to be in the defensive backfield, where you get Devon Marshall back and you get a guy like J.J. Johnson at the safety position that comes over from Georgia State as a veteran there. But really, there's not a whole lot of known commodities there, and a lot of guys that are going to have to kind of fill those shoes of some good cornerbacks that they had left from last season.
Cory Smith, Pack Pride, joining us on Pirate Radio Live. You mentioned C.J. Bailey kind of being ranked, whatever, the lower amongst ACC quarterbacks. That will put a little chip on the shoulder. How about State as a whole? Not a ton, I think, of expectations going into this year. And Cory, maybe it's just me being a glass half empty sports fan when it comes to expectations, but some of my State buddies have told me the same. If you go into a season with expectations like NC State did last year, or I'll throw Carolina in there too. Anytime there's a number beside their name heading into the season, it's like, yep, they're not going to be that good. Like, they can't live up to it. Do you feel better kind of going in under the radar a little bit this year?
Yeah, I mean, that's what makes the Clemsons and the Alabamas of the world and, all those teams that have been able to, Ohio State that's been able to do it for so long and keep that consistency up, even that much more impressive in the conferences they're in. But yeah, for NC State, the big thing going into this year is, there's not a whole lot of expectations. I believe USA Today was ranked them like number 10 in the ACC coming into the year, which, going from being ranked, inside the top 3 in most last season and then being underwhelming and finishing below 500. Going into this season, Dave Doran with his back against the wall, this is typically when he performs the best. When people think that the team's not going to be good, and he goes in there, the chip on the shoulder is that much bigger. But yeah, I think the big question mark is going to be, can you take care of the in-state teams? Can you beat an ECU at the beginning of the season? Can you take care of Duke, midway through the season, Wake Forest even earlier than that? And then, Campbell, yes, that is a game on the schedule, but the big one that I think a lot of people are thinking about is kind of bookending this. If you're able to win against ECU and UNC at the beginning and end of the season, that's, whatever you do in the middle, as long as you get to around 7 wins, 8 wins in the middle, that's going to be a successful season if you tack those two on with it as well before you get to a bowl game. So, I think that's the big thing right now is that's kind of the bar is like trying to get to that 8-9 win. If you get to 7 wins, it has to include, both ECU and UNC for different reasons.
And man, kind of a unique schedule for NC State. Usually you're getting maybe an FCS, maybe another, FBS team, but they go East Carolina and then it's Virginia, Wake, Duke, Virginia Tech. They get right into the ACC. So kind of important this game against East Carolina to get off to a good start because, you got to, you'll be favored against Virginia. Wake, always a good game, Duke. But those are some challenging ACC games right there in September for you guys.
Yeah, the key with those two is the fact that Wake and Duke are both on the road. Wake is a place that, NC State has played well. Actually, 2 out of the last 3 times they've gone there, they've won. But, since 2000, I want to say since the Phillip Rivers era, it had been just a house of horrors for NC State. So hopefully their thought process is hopefully we're over this by now and they can go in there and win against a first-year head coach. But, yeah, I mean, that Virginia game was one that was added on. It's actually a non-conference game. So they play 9 ACC opponents this year, but Virginia is one of the non-conference opponents. And then Notre Dame on the road is a non-conference opponent. So you only get, 2 games that were, potential gimmies, and you lost one against App State. I wouldn't say ECU is by any means a gimme. So now Campbell is the only gimme game on the schedule in non-conference play for NC State. There's some games where they'll be favored, but there's not one where you just kind of look on the schedule and go, oh, man, that's a really easy matchup. There's also not many that you look on there and go, oh, man, that's a really tough matchup for NC State. Those are winnable games for them, but that's where it's going to be, is kind of like NC State is kind of in that muddy middle of the ACC right now, and you have to be able to kind of claw your way out of that if you want to finish, with a respectable, say, 5-3 in conference play and build towards next year.
Yeah, thanks for reminding me about that Virginia game. My brain was trying to comprehend what the hell's going on with this math here. But yeah, how do the state folks feel about playing an ACC team in a non-conference game? Do they like it? Would you rather see a more unique opponent? What do you think?
Well, I think a lot of App State fans were hoping that NC State would end up in Boone, next year, end up where, App State is playing at NC State. I believe it was supposed to be this year, if I remember the way that things kind of fell. But that ended up happening. The ACC kind of pushed the rest of the conference to play against, quality opponents and not play against, the whatever group of 5 opponents, whatever you want to say, especially on the road. So they were pushing back against that. Now, Dave Dorn has came out since then and said, I wanted to play these games, but it was, something that the ACC pushed on us. So I think a lot of NC State fans were a little bit upset because they wanted to go to Boone. They want to go to some of these games on the road, but there's also a kind of feeling of like, all right, if you're going to play somebody that's a quality opponent, why didn't you schedule, somebody else in state that maybe could have helped you, at home, as opposed to, playing a Virginia at home and not really adding much value to, the tickets or bringing a lot of people in.
Cory Smith joining us. We'll check back in with Cory about a month from now as we get ready to kick off East Carolina at NC State. Cory, you said when you're done with this, you'll switch gears and you got a little basketball article to write. So the Pack are heading to Maui. Is that right?
Yes, sir. They've known about the Maui Invitational since Kevin Keats was the head coach for them, but we just found out what the actual schedule is going to look like. The first game for them will be against Seton Hall. And then everything after that will be unknown. But it's an interesting one because Seton Hall currently has a guy by the name of Trey Parker that was on NC State's roster last year. And then they also just got a guy in Najee Hines that comes out of South Garner originally. And, he is going to go there, a 6'10" power forward or center, whichever one they slot him in at. But 2 guys that, NC State had on their radar, and they'll have to face them in the opener of the Maui Invitational.
Good deal. That'll be interesting to follow. Pirates and Pack in football and basketball to get things going. 2 different Pirates. Cory does great work over at Pack Pride. You can follow and get to know the enemy by going to packpride.com, and you'll see a lot of football content there. Obviously, Cory, we'll check back in with you coming up in a month or so, but appreciate you joining us today, man.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you guys.